What's up, guys? This is Derek. Nice to see you guys again. Of course, it's been a long time. I think the last video was before Christmas. I had the tree in the background, as you saw, and it was obvious coming up. I think it was in November or early December, but it's been a long time. We've already in the new year, and in the second month of the new year. So yeah, it's been a while, and I apologize for that. But after this video, I hope that the Bible studies will be more frequent, and we can get this good thing back up and running like God had planned in the first place. So right now I'm going to introduce my guest. This is my sister-in-law, Sarah.
Hi, everybody.
And this is why I was holding back some information about the end of my testimony, because it's such an impactful situation that occurred in the last most recent, probably a little over a year ago.
November 17th of 2021.
Yeah, so unfortunately, Seth, my nephew, her son, has passed on to be with the Lord. And it's rough, but we're getting through it. The whole family has been touched by it. And that's why I could not leave this out of my testimony. It's such a big, impactful thing that happens in people's lives, that if we can give you any knowledge or any wisdom from what we're experiencing and what she's experiencing, then we would absolutely be grateful. And that's why we're doing this. So I'm going to ask Sarah a couple questions, and we'll get this video going right now. So let's start with a story about your son and how he impacted your life, and what happened here recently to him.
So, about a year and a half before Seth passed away, he was shot in a home invasion. They didn't realize he was home because the friend's car was gone, and he was shot several times. He was put into a headlock, and the other person emptied their clip into him. It had a huge impact on his life. He had numerous injuries. He lived through it, though. He got through it. It was during COVID, where I could not be at ICU, where he was in ICU for about a month. So he had to get through it by himself, and with God's grace and mercy, he did. And so he did suffer with PTSD extremely bad after that. He woke up every single night with night terrors, so bad that he had to change his clothes. The bed sheets had to be changed, and he was pretty miserable. He turned to marijuana for help. Not that I hadn't taken him to doctors, because I had tried to get him all the help that I could possibly get him, but our mental health system is not what it should be for his age. He was 21 years old whenever he passed away. He was 18 whenever he was shot. And so he smoked weed and seemed to thrive okay, but then he had to start drug testing. So he couldn't smoke weed anymore, and therefore he turned to pills. Unbeknownst to his doctors, he started drinking heavily, trying to control the PTSD, trying to get a good night's sleep, trying to not always being in fear of his life. And whenever he was taking his medication, it did help somewhat that the doctor gave him, but it didn't really cool those night terrors like he wanted them to. And so, as you all probably know, marijuana can leave your system in about 21 days, depending on how heavy the usage is. Pills only take about 3 days to leave the system. So a lot of our youth, if they're put in any situation where they have to sneak, they're going to do pills, because you can hide them in your pocket. They don't smell, these things. So they turn to pills for answers. Pills are a normal part of our everyday society. If our big toe hurts, we're going to go to the medicine cabinet and we're going to get a pill. So pills are considered okay for our youth. Yeah. So when a friend offered him Xanax and Perk 30s, he bought some. and he took the Xanax as he was going to a girl's house. He didn't want to have a night terror there, I'm sure. It was a new female that he had been with, and so it was the first time him staying at her house, unbeknownst to me, because he worked the night shift. I didn't even realize he wasn't at home whenever I woke up and the police officer was at the door. And so he took the pill, and he did not wake up at all because the pill was not a real pharmaceutically made Xanax. It was a fake Xanax, and it was mixed with illicit fentanyl. Now, this is illicit fentanyl. It's not pharmaceutical fentanyl. There are two very different things. Pharmaceutical fentanyl is made in a lab. It is processed correctly, and the fentanyl is distributed evenly, and it's more commonly found in patches or in IV medications, not in a pill form. So any pills nowadays that are on the street, 7 out of 10 of them are fake pills. And more than likely, fentanyl is not being cut into them anymore. The whole pill is made out of fentanyl and binding powders. And if you can think of the sweet and low packets that you get at the store, the little pink packets, what's inside of that packet, if it were fentanyl, can kill 500 people. So to put that into perspective, if you look at 2 grains of salt in your hand, that's how much it takes to kill a grown man. So fentanyl has clumping attributes to it. It doesn't mix well. So when our Mexican cartel is out in a pasture with a boat oar and a 5-gallon bucket mixing it, you can only imagine the end product result. And so that's, my son was poisoned with fentanyl. He did not overdose. I do not use the word overdose because overdose implies that there's a safe dose of illicit fentanyl, and there's just not. He was poisoned. He did not ask for fentanyl. He asked to get a good night's sleep and maybe even be out of his mind and his misery for a little while, maybe be high. I don't know, but he didn't ask to die. And so I know he didn't want to die because he had told me before, Mom, I am so unhappy. I just want to be dead. But the only reason I don't do that is because I know how it would affect you and my family. I know you would be crushed. And of course, when I never get to see his face again, I am crushed. And the only thing I can do now is try to be as impactful as I can in telling his story, not only because I want Seth to be remembered, and I don't only want him remembered for the life that he died in. I want him to be remembered as the kind, big-hearted, loving, compassionate, funny kid that he was. So I tell his story in every chance I get. And I also warn people about the dangers of fentanyl and to not turn to a pill on the streets for mental help or for pain or for any other reason, because it's definitely not the answer. Sometimes only God's the answer. And God doesn't work in our time. So although I prayed over Seth and I warred with the devil over my son, that didn't happen. But God has a time and a place for everything. And I do believe if we lean on him hard enough that he will help us in things. But God had other plans for Seth. And I'm just thankful that I know that my son is in a better place where he does not have PTSD anymore. He does not wake me up in the middle of the night sweating down with night terrors, crying, or trying to drink himself to death. And he is in a better place. And I know this for sure.
Amen. So, what when he got shot, what part of his body was affected, and why did it hurt so bad for him to sleep at night? Was it the dreams of the shot, or was it a combination of the pain from the shot and the dreams of the act that took place? Or?
So Seth was put in a headlock whenever he was shot. The guy was a huge guy, over 6 foot tall. He wasn't that big of a guy. And he put him in a headlock, and the girlfriend that had also broke in, he told her to shoot him. So the headlock is actually what saved Seth's life, because all of the gunshots went from here down. Several into the abdomen, several through the legs, the foot. He had his foot up in the air, so that was the first shot that he remembered, feeling the searing pain. He was scared to eat because of all the intestinal injuries. They took most of his small and large intestines out. They took a lot of his colon out. They couldn't take anymore, and he ended up getting a bowel blockage because of not eating exactly. He ate a lot of baby food because he was scared to eat, and he was pretty miserable because as a 21-year-old, you should be able to eat lots of cheese and chips and all that good stuff. And he couldn't have any of that anymore. But he ended up with a bowel blockage, another surgery. But what really bothered Seth the most, except for the fear of eating, because of fear of another obstruction in his bowel, because I don't know if you all know anything about that, but it's very, very painful. Literally, he could lay out flat on a bed and I could see a bulge moving back and forth in his stomach. And it, trying to expel and trying to go through the rest of the body, but it just wouldn't go any further because of scar tissue that had built up and kind of kinked in there. And it's extremely painful. So he lived off of handfuls of Tylenol every day. But what was the most bothersome were the night terrors. And when he woke at night, he didn't dream about being shot. It was always a dream about somebody that he loved being tortured or killed, or something bad happening to someone that he loved. It wasn't generally himself. It was generally other people. And he didn't want to go to sleep at night. Those were two things that were taken from him, is the joy of eating and the joy of sleeping, what most of us love. And so he couldn't do any of those with joy anymore. And that's the mental issues, sure, there was physical pain, but mental pain is so much worse sometimes than physical pain is.
Yeah. Well, he was willing to fight. I mean, even though he was in that much pain, he didn't want to die. He wanted to, he thought to himself, right, that he may not live as long as some of us because of his health issues from the shot. And but he did not want to die. He wanted to live. And me personally, I talked to him while he was in the hospital from the shot. And he told me, that he talked to Jesus. And I was like, you mean you literally talked to Jesus? He's like, yep. Because I asked him, I was like, while you were out, what happened? Because he died on the table, right? Or for a minute, they didn't try to resuscitate him, or
he didn't die, but he was very close.
Close to death.
He was very close, yeah.
So he didn't die and pass to heaven and see the light and all that. But Jesus gave him comfort. Jesus talked to him. And he gave his life to the Lord. If he hadn't before, he settled it at that moment. And he told me that. He was like, I've given my life to the Lord before, but I wanted to make sure, because you never know, what can happen, and especially with stuff like this. And so that gave me comfort. Beknownst to us that a little bit later, a year or so later, he would have so much pain that he would end up taking a little bitty pill that he thought was Xanax, and it ended up being fentanyl.
Because they look just alike. You cannot tell a difference in a fake pill and a real pill. There's pill presses to make them look identical.
Mm-hmm. So, wow. So we wanted to make sure that, first off, that you're aware of the dangers of the street drugs of all different types. And that's what she's on many, many talk shows and campaigns and talking in gyms and schools and going all over the state. And right now you've got something going on in Austin, Texas pretty soon, right? You want to tell them about that?
Yeah, Tuesday or Wednesday, we are actually going to Austin to the Capitol. It's actually a harm reduction group that is putting it on. Which I'm not all about harm reduction. I do believe if somebody is going to use needles, that a clean needle exchange is a good thing. But as far as fentanyl testing strips, I'm not really fond of those because people are not properly educated on how to use them. They're told to break off a piece of the pill, dissolve it in water. Who's to say the other 90% of that pill isn't what contains the fentanyl? So I don't want to give kids a false sense of security that, hey, I can take this pill because it tested positive. I don't think that's go in the right direction, and harm reduction hasn't proved to be effective for fentanyl. It has for other drugs, but not for fentanyl. And so, but I can't knock harm reduction that much because that's where I get my Narcan from. Narcan is the only life-saving tool that we have if we catch a poisoning or an overdose in time. Mm-hmm. And so we are going to let our voices be heard, to voice our opinions, to tell our kids stories. We're going to meet with legislation to try to get things changed in regards to fentanyl to have its own ICD-9 code, because all of the statistics that you hear are not accurate. There's one ICD-10 code for opioid overdose, and they do not differentiate between fentanyl and other opioids. So you never know really, and plus they're 4 months behind on talk screens. So you never know really the amount of deaths that are happening because of this. So there are several things we're fighting with legislation about to try to get passed, because this is a new epidemic. It's not the old opioid epidemic, and the old rules do not apply to it. It's killing our military-aged kids. It's the number one killer for 18 to 45-year-olds last year above anything else. And now I have other moms that are fighting with me that have 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds. We actually have two 17-month-old kids that's died from it, and it's getting. I have a 12-year-old in my group. It's Angel Mom, so it's not just getting 18 to 45-year-olds. The young people are taking these pills at school. It's just to put it into perspective to you. I will tell you this: they market these things with pretty colors for kids, and they can put something as simple as an emoji on Snapchat, and they have 15 drug dealers beating on their door trying to sell it to them because they know what that emoji means. So if you think you're going to look in your kid's phone and figure out they're doing something, you're not unless you know every single what one of those emojis mean, which I have educational materials on, if anybody ever wants any. But it's just, it's an epidemic. It's a problem.
And you have a Facebook page, correct?
I do.
If they wanted some information, what's the location of that Facebook
So
page?
it is called Texas Gulf Coast War on Fentanyl. And my partner also has a page called Travis's Voice. And I also moderate for a nationwide group of probably over 25,000 people now, that's called Lost Voices of Fentanyl, and they have lots and lots of material on their page, and it's nationwide. It's not just for Texas. We have a lot of Texas information on our page, but theirs is for lots of different states, so they're a big source for information as well.
Awesome. And it's not just the pills. This has gone into, from what I understand, even marijuana in some situations where you got to be careful. And I'm not knocking if you need to smoke, like you have a situation, but what's the dangers of just going to just anybody and getting maybe an innocent little joint to smoke?
It is not uncommon. I mean, it's not common, but it does happen. They are passing over fentanyl in liquid form as well, and so it comes from China to the Mexican cartel, and then the Mexican cartel brings it over in several different forms because of our border situation and our immigration situation, and so it can be sprayed on marijuana because the idea behind fentanyl is to get your customer addicted, right? So they keep coming back, because fentanyl is, if you use it if you live within 3 hours, you're going back because you're having such terrible withdrawals. So it's 50 times more potent than some drugs. It's 100 times more potent than heroin. It's a lot more potent than anything else that's out there. And so you can only imagine the addictive qualities.
Yeah.
And so it's not common, but yes, we do have mothers in our group whose child had nothing else but THC and fentanyl in their system.
So really, I mean, be careful, guys, out there. I mean, I would say even if you need to smoke marijuana or take THC, try to find a legal way to do so with a doctor's prescription, Because I'm not knocking people taking prescriptions, but taking it from the streets is what it could kill you. And there's proof that this is happening all over the world, especially in the United States, where they're just killing our kids. And it is how high is the rates of death in the U.S. compared to like car wrecks and other types of deaths that teenagers and
It's really hard to give statistics because, like I said, they don't know the correct number because they're not categorized correctly.
Yeah.
But it is the number one killer over car wrecks, over suicides, over all of the other things that can kill someone. This has gotten the most deaths out of everything. And it's only getting worse. Every single day, it's only getting worse. And so there's no CDC guidelines. You know, when COVID happened, we all knew within 3 months, wash your hands, social distance, wear masks. There's no CDC public service announcements as of yet, and this has been going on for almost 8 years. The government has not helped us in any way or form to fight this epidemic. It is mothers such as myself who are heartbroken because they've lost their babies and fathers that are getting out there and educating the public. And if we don't, there would be no one else that was. So that's why we're doing it. We're not fighting for our kids anymore. They're gone. We're fighting for your kids and your grandkids and people that you know and love. Yeah. And so it's important to get the message out there.
Really is. And I mean, it's touched my life, you know, in a major way because I just can't. All the times that I wanted to go and hang out with Seth and I wanted to, you know, be his good uncle, and we could just go on and on over and over about the things we could have done better in our lives pertaining to someone that passed away. The same thing happens with my mom. Like I could have been better to her, spent more time with her, you know, and just all the things that I should have said to her. And but I guess what I'm learning is we can't beat ourselves over the head about that kind of stuff. What do you have to say about that?
It's very true. The what ifs will definitely kill you if you allow them to. I played that game for quite some time. I cried and I cried and I sobbed and then when I didn't cry, I felt guilty because I wasn't crying. So I'd go put on a sad song until I did cry because if I'm not crying, I must not have loved. I mean, the what ifs and the regrets will kill you if you allow them. And on that note, I will tell you what happened in my life that literally changed my grieving process. Do I still grieve? Absolutely. Every single day, every waking moment that I have, I'm grieving over the loss of my son. But because of my Christian background, I had an issue in my mind of what if my son did not make it to heaven? What if he is in hell because of how he died? And so I really struggled with that. And I walked out to my garage one day because I didn't want to wake my husband, and I was sobbing. So I walked out to the garage and I was sobbing so hard I literally fell to my knees to the floor. And when I did, my phone fell out of my pocket, and I didn't know how I was going to get up off that floor. So I did the only thing I know to do, and that's start praying. And I wasn't praying to God for his help. I was not just for his help. I was actually telling him how mad I was at him and how much I didn't want to thank him. And I don't want to do this. And I thought, well, there's a song by Toby Mac called 21 Years. He also lost his child to fentanyl at 21 years old. And so I said, if I can just listen to the live version of that song, which was on my playlist, then I think I can get it together and get up off this floor. So I reached and grabbed my phone. I put it on. At the end of that song, it turns into a praise. And it tells you to lift your hands. And at that moment, I told God, I'm going to lift my hands even though I don't want to. I don't want to praise you. I don't want to talk to you. I was mad at God because he took my son, was what was in my head, just like every other mother thinks. And I said, but I'm going to. And the only reason I'm going to is because, first of all, I know you deserve it, even though I don't feel like you do right now. But second of all, is because I need your help. So if I can praise my way out of this sobbing situation on my garage floor, then that's what I'm going to do. And I begrudgingly lifted my hands to God, and I just, with tears strolling down my face, just started praising God, praising him for the 21 years that I got to have with my son. And God has only spoken to me 3 times that were beyond a shadow of a doubt, God. The other times I can say, yeah, maybe, but I think maybe I was just thinking that in my head. We're very skeptical sometimes when it comes to God. But 3 times I can tell you for sure without a shadow of a doubt. And all 3 times had something to do with my son. And this time I heard the words, I answered your prayer, just not the way you thought I would. And I immediately knew what God meant, that all those prayers that I had prayed over Seth, and I had warred with Satan over my son, and I had just begged God, please deliver him out of this PTSD. Please deliver him out of his pain. Please, God, please. He did answer my prayer. And that's the only thing that keeps me sane to this day. He's out of pain. He's out of heartache. He's out of stress. He is with God in the most beautiful place that you could possibly ever imagine. And because Seth did have a relationship with God, he may not have expressed it a lot to other people, but when somebody needed something, because people came to me after he died and told me the things that they told him, that he told them to help them through their journey in life. And a lot of it was related to God. So it made me proud of the fact that something I told him or something someone else told him may have sunk in. But when God told me that, I could get up off that garage floor and I could stop sobbing until the next wave hit, because we have a faithful God who is so merciful and so just that he can take my son that took a pill that he shouldn't have been taking, an illicit drug that he shouldn't have been taking, and have mercy on him enough that he can still deliver him, because he knew nothing on this earth would deliver his mind from that pain. So he had to take him so that he could be delivered. And I will be forever grateful to God for is my selfishness still involved? Yes, I still want my son here, but I can live with this pain if it means he has no more pain forever.
Amen. Yeah, that's true. And I lost my mom, as we talked about in the last 2 videos before this, and it's hurtful, but she was going through a lot of pain as well, and it would be so selfish of us to keep them here and want, when they're having to go through all this pain, unless God's just going to heal them completely, which he can do. But we can't just automatically think he's going to just heal someone completely every time we pray. It's in his will to do the things that he does. And we can't force God to do our will. We have to trust that his will is much greater, much more wise, and much better for our situations here and for their situations with him in heaven. The Bible says that they are ruling and reigning with Christ. My mom made it to heaven in 2008, so she's been ruling and reigning with Christ. Now, did she have anything to do with did they talk about Seth? We don't know. They could have. And she could have said, he's in a lot of pain. And maybe they did talk about it. God's going to do what he's going to do. But he did say that we are going to be ruling and reigning with him. So did my mom have anything to do with bringing him out of that pain just to cause her pain? It's a big decision that she probably, if she did talk to God about it, I'm sure she most likely said, do your will, because it's too hard to choose which way to go. I don't want her to lose her son, but I don't want Seth to go through all this pain. So yeah. I'm sure my mom just said, you be God.
That's usually what she did.
And I'll be me.
It's usually what she did. Beth was Seth's favorite person on this earth. The first tattoo he got was his grandmother's name and her birth and death date. And it destroyed him when she passed away. He was so incredibly hurt because she was his number one. For a while, I wondered if I was his number 2. Yeah. But yeah, she was a wonderful inspiration and blessing to Seth, and I know that she's getting to be a wonderful inspiration and blessing to him up there too. I'm so glad that they can be together.
Yeah, it's a blessing to think about those things, and I can't wait to be with both of them.
Me too. Me too.
Obviously. Is there any specific scriptures that you have and that you just love to read about the situation, or you just read whatever comes up?
I read whatever comes up. I have looked up some scriptures that I remember from the past. One of the biggest things, I wondered what my purpose was anymore. I'm not a mom anymore, so what's my purpose on this earth? And sometimes I wonder if it's not to bring mothers back to Christ, because when you lose a child, the first thing you do is start blaming God. And so I've had lots of mothers call me and, how do you still have faith? After God took your son, how do you still have faith? And tell me, God says, I will not leave you comfortless. I will come to you. And that's one of, we don't have to go to him. He'll come to us. So that's one of my favorite scriptures. I lean on that scripture a lot. He has us in the hollow of his hand, of his nail scarred hand, and I also lean on the fact that God gave his own son willingly so that we could have everlasting life. He knows what it feels like to lose his own son. He knows what it feels like to see him crucified on a cross, and beaten and spat upon. And he did that willingly for you and I.
Yeah.
And so no matter what, my love for Christ will remain the same, no matter what happens to me on this earthly world. So I try to help other mothers through scripture and through my own experiences. And that's one of the big ones I leave. Everybody says God won't give you anything that is too hard to handle. And the Bible never says that anywhere. It does say, though, that he will walk with you through anything he puts on you. And so, obviously, if he's going to be right there with you, you're going to be able to handle it.
Yeah. He will have the grace. That, and Paul talked about that a lot, about, God didn't deliver me from the things that I prayed. Some of the things, Paul would say, here I am healing the sick and doing your work, Lord. And then he prayed and the Lord wouldn't heal him. And that's when he started realizing it's about grace. God, he learned at that moment that God will give you the grace to move through and whatever the pain is. And so God allowed Paul to go through those things to teach us in the future what we'll be going through. And yes, we're going to go through these things, but why go through it without the Lord by your side? And why not get to know your Creator? That's why I always ask people, why would you not want to know the one and only Creator that created us and everything? And some people just don't believe that that's how it all went down. That's a whole nother subject, but I'm telling you right now, that is how it went down.
No,
And,
you can't argue with experience.
we know Jesus personally, so you can't tell us to believe in evolution or any of that nonsense. That's just, and I haven't felt the pain that God felt sending his only son to die on the cross for us. They made that decision before the foundations of the earth. That I'm sure they, do you want me to stay up here with you, or do you want them? And Jesus said, I want them. And God was willing to put his son through all of that pain for us on the cross so we would have a chance at life, before we were ever created, because he wouldn't have created us without a plan. So just keep that in mind.
God gave his son so that mine would have everlasting life.
Amen. Is there anything else you want to say before we close?
No, I think I've spoken enough. Thank you all for watching, and I hope that you've learned something, and I hope that it's been beneficial, and God bless you all.
God bless you, and thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.